The sun was burning bright over the dry land of Dusty Ridge when Tom rode into town. His clothes were simple, his hat old, and his boots covered with dust. Beside him walked a gray donkey carrying 2 bags tied on its sides. The donkey's slow steps kicked up small clouds of sand as they crossed the main street. People sitting outside the saloon stopped talking when they saw him. They looked at Tom and started laughing. He had not even spoken a word, but everyone already knew who he was. He was the man who had just inherited the most useless land in the county. "Hey, look who's back," shouted one man sitting near the door of the saloon. "The new owner of the broken ranch." Another laughed and said, "I heard his uncle's land is so dry even snakes moved away." The crowd chuckled, enjoying their jokes. Some called out to Tom as he passed, but he did not stop. He only tipped his hat politely and kept walking toward the general store. He was not a man who liked to argue. Inside the store, Mr. Hill, the storekeeper, stood behind the counter. He was a short man with a kind face and a belly that showed he liked good food. He smiled when he saw Tom, but even his smile had a hint of pity in it. "Well, Tom," said Mr. Hill, "so you finally came back to take care of your uncle's place." Tom nodded and placed his list on the counter. "Yes, sir. I'll need some nails, a hammer, a roll of rope, 2 bags of beans, a sack of flour, and a few candles." Mr. Hill started gathering the things. "You know, son," he said as he worked, "your uncle's land is rough. Folks say the well dried up 10 years ago. He spent his last years alone trying to keep that ranch alive. You sure you want to live there?" Tom smiled faintly. It was his home. He left it to me. I'll make it my home too. Mr. Hill sighed and nodded. "You're a good man, Tom. Not many would take that burden." Tom paid for his things, packed them on Gray's back, and started riding out of town. The same people who mocked him earlier watched him go. Some whispered more jokes, but he ignored them. He had work to do. The road to Coyote Hollow was long and empty. The sun hung low, turning the sky orange as evening came. After 2 hours of riding, Tom reached the ranch. The old wooden gate creaked when he pushed it open. The house stood at the center of the land, its paint long gone and its roof missing several boards. A dry wind blew through the broken windows, making a hollow sound. Tom stopped and looked around. There were patches of dead grass, a few leaning fence posts, and an empty barn that looked ready to fall. Yet even in that silence, something about the place felt peaceful. He tied Gray near the fence and spoke to him softly. "Well, Gray, this is it. Not much to look at, but it's home now." Gray brayed loudly, his ears twitching as if he agreed. Tom unpacked his things, lit a small fire, and cooked beans for supper. He ate quietly, watching the stars rise in the wide sky. He thought about his Uncle Ben. The old man had been tough and quiet, a man who rarely spoke but worked harder than anyone. People used to say he was strange, always digging around his land or walking alone in the hills at night. Some even whispered that he once found gold out there, but no one ever saw proof. Tom remembered those stories from his childhood. He had visited his uncle once when he was a boy. Ben had shown him how to fix a fence, how to saddle a horse, and how to respect the land. Tom never forgot that. Now that Ben was gone, Tom felt like it was his duty to bring life back to the ranch. The next morning, he woke up before sunrise. He fed Gray, then started fixing the old fence around the corral. The wood was dry and cracked, and most nails had rusted away. It took him hours just to repair a few sections. Sweat ran down his neck, and his hands were sore by noon, but he kept working. After lunch, he checked the barn. The roof had holes big enough to see the sky through, and the door was barely hanging on its hinges. He decided to fix the roof first. Gray followed him around, sometimes pulling a piece of wood with a rope, sometimes standing nearby watching quietly. Days passed like that. Tom worked from morning till sunset. He repaired the barn, cleaned the well, and built a small pen for Gray. But even after all his effort, the ranch still looked poor and lifeless. There was no grass for animals, no water in the stream bed, and no sign of any hope. One afternoon, while Tom was checking the fence behind the barn, he noticed Gray acting strangely. The donkey walked around an old well, pawing at the ground and braying loudly. Tom frowned and went closer. "What's wrong, boy?" he asked. Gray kicked the ground again, sending dust into the air. The soil there looked different, darker and softer than the rest. Tom knelt and touched it. It felt loose, as if someone had dug there long ago. He went to fetch his shovel. When he came back, Gray was still standing over the spot, looking proud as if he had found something important. Tom started digging carefully. The dirt came off easily, and after a few minutes his shovel hit something hard. He stopped and brushed the dirt away with his hands. A corner of old wood appeared under the soil. It looked like a small chest covered with dirt and roots. His heartbeat quickened. He dug faster until the chest was free enough to pull out. It was heavy, old, and had a rusty metal lock on it. Tom sat beside it, breathing hard from excitement. He looked around. The wind blew quietly across the dry land. No one was there to see what he had found except Gray. "Well, partner," Tom said, smiling at the donkey. "Looks like you found something worth our trouble." Gray brayed again, shaking his ears. Tom tried to open the chest, but the lock was too tight. He carried it to the porch and set it near the steps. The sun was setting again, painting the sky red. He sat there for a long time, staring at the chest, wondering what could be inside. Was it gold? Was it his uncle's secret? Or just old tools forgotten with time? Whatever it was, he knew his life was about to change. The town that laughed at him would soon stop laughing once they saw what he and Gray had uncovered at Coyote Hollow. As night fell, the ranch seemed different. The same wind that once felt lonely now carried a sense of mystery. The stars shone brighter, and the quiet sound of the desert seemed full of promise. Tom looked at Gray and said softly, "Tomorrow we find out what's inside." The donkey lowered his head and stood beside him as the fire crackled. For the first time since he arrived, Tom felt that maybe his uncle's land was not so useless after all. Something was hidden under its dust, and Gray had just led him to it. The night felt long for Tom. He could not stop thinking about the wooden chest that Gray had helped him find. Every sound of the wind made him glance toward the porch where it rested. He tried to sleep but kept waking up again and again. He finally gave up, lit a lantern, and sat near the chest. The old box was heavy and covered with mud. The lock had rusted so badly that it looked ready to fall apart. Tom tried using a small hammer and screwdriver, but the metal only bent. He decided to wait until morning when he could see clearly. When the first light of dawn reached the hills, Tom was already working. He heated the lock with a bit of fire, then hit it gently with a stone. After a few strikes, the rusty lock broke with a crack. His hands trembled a little as he lifted the lid. Inside the chest lay a thick layer of dry cloth. He pulled it aside and froze. There were small sacks made of leather tied with rope. He opened one and stared in disbelief. Inside was a handful of shiny gold coins. He opened another bag and found more coins. Some were old and dull, but others sparkled in the morning light. Beneath them, he found a small notebook wrapped in oil paper. Tom sat back and took a deep breath. His heart pounded as he looked at the gold. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. For years, people had said his uncle went mad chasing dreams of gold. But it looked like old Ben had actually found it. Gray came close and sniffed the chest. Tom laughed softly and patted the donkey's head. "You did it, partner. You really found it." He looked through the notebook. The pages were filled with his uncle's handwriting, rough and uneven. It spoke of secret digging in the hills, of long days under the sun, and of nights spent hiding from strangers who had once tried to steal his claim. The last few pages were about the chest. His uncle had buried it near the well after he became too old to travel. He wrote that he wanted the ranch to stay safe and hoped that one day, someone honest would find it. Tom read every word carefully. By the time he finished, his eyes felt wet. His uncle had trusted him even after death. The man everyone thought was crazy had been smart enough to hide his fortune. Tom packed the coins back carefully. He decided not to tell anyone yet. Dusty Ridge was full of talkers and greedy men who would do anything for gold. He knew if word got out, his peace would be gone forever. That day, he worked as usual. He repaired the barn door and cleaned the porch. But his mind kept returning to the chest. He thought about how he could use the gold to bring life back to the ranch. He could buy cattle, tools, seeds, and maybe even dig a new well. For the first time since he arrived, he saw a future for Coyote Hollow. In the evening, he went to town to buy some supplies. The same people were sitting outside the saloon. As soon as they saw him, the laughter began again. "Look who's back," one of them said. "Did the sand finally blow your roof away?" Another added, "Maybe he came to sell his donkey. That's all he'll have left soon." Tom smiled calmly and tied Gray near the post. "Evening, boys," he said. "Hope the town is still standing." They laughed more, but Tom did not let their words bother him. He went into the general store and greeted Mr. Hill. "Good evening, Tom," said the storekeeper.
How's the ranch treating you?
"It's getting better," Tom said. "I'll need more feed, a few wooden planks, and some tools for digging." Mr. Hill raised an eyebrow. "You planning to dig for water?" Tom nodded. "Something like that. I think the land still has life in it. Just needs a bit of care." Mr. Hill smiled kindly. "You sound like your uncle. He always said that land had more to offer than people believed." Tom chuckled. Maybe he was right. When he was done buying, he noticed a group of men whispering near the door. One of them was named Carl, a rough man who liked trouble. Carl called out, "Hey, Tom, you still wasting time on that dead ranch?" Tom answered, "It's not wasted time if it's my home." Carl grinned. "Your uncle died poor trying to save that land. You'll end up the same if you stay there." Tom looked at him straight. "I'd rather die honest than live lazy." The store fell silent for a moment. Then Carl spat on the floor and walked away. Tom paid for his things and left quietly. On the ride back, he thought about his uncle again. People had called the old man a fool too, but he had worked hard until the end. Now Tom understood why his uncle never cared about the laughter of others. Truth did not need approval. When he reached the ranch, the sky was turning purple. He unloaded the supplies and fed Gray. Then he sat near the fire and opened the notebook again. On one of the back pages, his uncle had drawn a small map. It showed a hill north of the ranch with a red mark at the top. Next to it was a note that said, "More where this came from." Tom stared at the map for a long time. If his uncle had hidden one chest, maybe there were others. He looked at the hills in the distance, their shapes dark against the sky. Curiosity started to grow inside him. The next morning, he packed a small bag, filled a canteen, and took Gray with him. The donkey walked beside him patiently as they climbed the rocky path behind the ranch. The map was rough, but Tom used it carefully. After an hour of walking, they reached a small flat area near the top. There was an old tree there, dry but still standing. Tom looked around. The ground near the roots looked disturbed. He took out his shovel and started digging. Gray stood beside him, swishing his tail. After a while, he hit something hard again. His heart jumped. He brushed away the dirt and found another piece of wood. But this time it was not a chest. It was a wooden box filled with papers and stones. He pulled it out and opened it. Inside were more notes, old tools, and what looked like a small bag of silver coins. It was not as much as the first treasure, but enough to prove the map was true. His uncle had hidden several spots of value around the ranch. Tom smiled proudly. "You were right again, Uncle Ben," he said quietly. He packed everything and returned home before sunset. That evening he sat near the porch and watched the stars appear. The ranch no longer looked empty. It felt alive, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Gray stood nearby, chewing on hay. Tom looked at him and said, "Guess we have a lot more work to do, partner." He could already imagine the faces of the townspeople when they saw the ranch rebuilt. The same people who laughed at him would soon ride out to see what he had done. And when they did, they would learn that hard work and faith could turn even the driest land into gold. The night wind carried the smell of earth and grass. Tom closed his eyes and smiled. The land that once looked dead was now whispering stories of hope. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Days passed quickly after Tom found the second box in the hills. He hid both treasures safely inside a secret spot under the floor of his cabin. Every evening he worked on improving the ranch. He bought wooden planks from town and fixed the roof of the main house. He cleaned the barn and built a water trough for Gray. The once lifeless place was slowly coming back to shape. Tom's hard work started to show. A few weeks later, green grass began to appear near the old well. He had repaired the pipes and water started flowing again. For the first time in many years, the land around Coyote Hollow looked alive. Birds came back and even rabbits started running near the fence. Tom felt proud every time he looked at what he had built. Each day he worked with new energy. The gold he found gave him a reason to keep going, but it was not just about the money anymore. It was about proving that his uncle's land was not worthless. But soon, people in Dusty Ridge began to talk again. One morning, Mr. Hill, the storekeeper, was stacking flour sacks when two men entered the shop. They were talking loudly. "You hear about Tom's ranch?" one said. "Someone told me he's got water running there again." The other man replied, "That can't be true. The land is dry as bone. Mr. Hill looked up and said, "It is true. I saw him buy new tools and pipes last week. The man's been working hard." The first man frowned. "Hard work or luck?" "I bet he found something out there. That old place never gave anyone a drop of water before." By the next day, the rumor had spread all over town. Some said Tom found gold. Others said he found oil. A few even claimed he discovered an underground river. The story grew bigger with every retelling. When Tom came to town to buy seeds, people stared at him differently. Some were curious, others jealous. Carl, the rough man from the saloon, stood on the porch and called out loudly, "Hey, Tom, what's your secret? You hiding something good out there?" Tom tied Gray near the post and replied calmly, "No secret, just hard work." Carl smirked. Hard work doesn't turn dead land green overnight. Tom met his eyes. "Maybe it does when you stop wasting time at the saloon." The people around laughed at Carl's expense. Carl's face turned red, but he said nothing. Tom went inside the store, bought what he needed, and left quietly. As he rode back, he thought about the growing whispers. He knew that once greed entered people's hearts, trouble followed. He decided to keep his treasures even more secure. That night, he moved the gold deeper underground in a place only he and Gray knew. The next morning, Tom started planting seeds. He had bought corn, beans, and a few fruit trees. He worked all day long, sweating under the sun. Gray followed him around as always, pulling small tools or carrying water from the well. The donkey had become more than an animal to him. It was his friend and helper. By the end of the week, small green shoots began to rise from the soil. Seeing that, Tom felt joy that words could not describe. He stood near the fence at sunset, looking at the land shining under the golden light. The ranch was no longer a forgotten place. It was alive again, just as his uncle might have wanted. One evening, Mr. Hill rode up to the ranch. Tom saw him coming and waved. "Evening, Mr. Hill," Tom said. "What brings you here?" The storekeeper smiled. "I wanted to see your work with my own eyes." "The town won't stop talking about it." Tom laughed lightly. "They should come and work a day here before they talk so much." Mr. Hill looked around, impressed. "You've done well, Tom. This place looks better than it has in 20 years. "I just gave it a bit of care," Tom said. "The land did the rest," Mr. Hill nodded. "Still, people are curious. Some think you found something out here. I don't believe those tales, but you know how talk spreads fast." Tom's smile faded slightly. "I know, that's why I keep quiet. I don't want trouble." Mr. Hill understood. "Be careful, son. The world changes when people think you have gold. Jealous hearts can cause harm." Tom thanked him for the warning. They shared a cup of coffee before Mr. Hill left. After he rode away, Tom sat on the porch in deep thought. The quiet of the night surrounded him. He knew his uncle must have faced the same problem when he found the gold. That was probably why he hid it in the first place. A few nights later, trouble came. Tom was asleep when Gray started braying loudly outside. The sound woke him at once. He grabbed his lantern and rifle and stepped out. The night was dark and a cold wind blew through the ranch. He saw shadows moving near the barn. "Who's there?" he called. No answer came, only the rustling of dry grass. He walked slowly toward the barn, his boots crunching on the dirt. The lantern light swung in his hand, throwing moving shapes on the walls. When he reached the corner, he saw two men running away into the night. Tom fired once in the air to scare them. Gray was still braying, his eyes wide with fear. Tom calmed him down and checked the barn. Nothing seemed stolen, but he noticed the ground near the fence had been dug. Someone had been searching for something. He sighed heavily and whispered, "Looks like the rumors reached the wrong ears." The next morning, he repaired the damage and built a stronger gate. He also made sure the chest under the cabin was still safe. Thankfully, it was untouched. But now he knew he had to be careful. Later that week, Carl came again, pretending to be friendly. He rode up to the ranch with a fake smile. "Howdy, Tom," he said. "Heard you had visitors the other night. Need some help keeping watch?" Tom studied him carefully. "No, thank you. Gray keeps better watch than most men." Carl laughed awkwardly. "Come on, Tom, no need to be cold. We're all friends here. Folks just want to know how you made this place come alive. Maybe you could share your luck." Tom shook his head. "There's no luck, Carl, only work. If you want your land to bloom, start digging instead of drinking." Carl's smile vanished. He turned his horse and said, "You'll regret keeping secrets, Tom." Then he rode off, leaving dust behind. Tom watched him go with a calm face, but inside he felt uneasy. The town's curiosity was turning into greed, and he could sense danger coming. That night he sat near the fire, thinking about what to do. He opened his uncle's notebook again and found another note he had missed before. It said, "If you ever find the gold, protect it with the land itself. The earth gives, but it also hides." Tom thought about those words for a long time. Then he smiled slightly. His uncle had left not only treasure, but wisdom too. He decided to dig a deep cellar under the barn to hide everything there. He worked on it quietly for several days, using only Gray for help. The donkey carried out the dirt, load after load. By the end of the week, they had built a strong underground room with stone walls. Inside it, Tom placed both boxes and covered the entrance carefully. Now, even if someone searched the whole ranch, they would never find the treasure. As the sun set over Coyote Hollow that evening, Tom looked at his land and felt a deep peace. He knew the real fortune was not the gold alone, but the life and pride he had built on his uncle's soil. Gray stood beside him, tail swaying, eyes calm. Tom patted his neck and said, "Let them talk, old friend. We know the truth." The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of growing crops. The ranch that once brought laughter to the town now stood as a quiet reminder that patience and faith could turn even dry ground into hope. But Tom did not know that Carl and his men were not done yet. Far from it, they were planning something much worse. Tom had grown used to the calm of Coyote Hollow. The days were full of work and the nights were quiet under the stars. His crops were growing, the well was full, and the barn stood strong. The land had turned into a home, and every part of it carried the mark of his hands. Gray stayed close, always alert and loyal. But trouble was not far away. Carl and his two friends, Rick and Mason, had been watching Tom from a distance. They met secretly behind the saloon, whispering about gold and buried treasure. The rumors had turned into greed. Carl's eyes burned with envy whenever he heard about Tom's progress. "He found something," Carl said one night as he slammed his cup on the table. "No man can fix that dead land without help from luck or gold." Rick nodded. Maybe he found what his old uncle was hiding. People used to say there was treasure buried somewhere on that ranch. Mason leaned closer. "Then why don't we find out? We go at night." "He's only one man and that donkey won't stop us," Carl grinned. Exactly what I was thinking. The plan was made in silence. They would ride out after sunset and search the land. That same evening, Tom sat on his porch with Gray nearby. The air was cool and a soft wind rustled through the grass. He watched the sky turn from gold to blue and then to black as stars filled the sky. He felt at peace, not knowing danger was drawing near. When night fell deep, Carl and his men rode quietly toward Coyote Hollow. They tied their horses behind a group of rocks and walked on foot. The moonlight helped them see the fences and the barn in the distance. Inside the house, Tom was asleep. Gray, however, sensed something. His ears twitched and he lifted his head. The donkey made a low sound, stamping his hooves. Tom woke up and grabbed his rifle. He had learned to trust Gray's instincts. The donkey was never wrong. Tom stepped out of the cabin and looked around. The night was still except for the faint sound of movement near the barn. "Who's there?" he shouted. Carl's men froze for a second. Then one of them whispered, "Light it." Before Tom could move closer, a small flame appeared near the barn wall. In a moment, the dry wood caught fire. Orange flames climbed up fast, lighting the dark land. Tom ran toward the barn, shouting at the top of his lungs, "No, stop!" Gray brayed loudly and kicked the ground. The noise scared the men, but Carl shouted, "Keep searching!"
He's hiding it somewhere near?
Tom grabbed a bucket and ran to the well. He threw water on the fire again and again, but the flames kept growing. The barn was old and dry, and soon the roof started to burn. Gray pulled on a rope tied to the fence, dragging a barrel of water closer. Tom used it to wet the ground around the fire to stop it from spreading. Smoke filled the air, and the night turned red with light. Carl and his men started digging near the fence, shouting angrily, "Where's the gold? He must have it hidden here." Tom saw them and raised his rifle. "Get off my land!" Carl turned and pointed his gun too. "You think you can keep all that gold for yourself? That land should belong to real men who know how to use it." Tom's voice was firm. "This land belonged to my uncle. Now it's mine. You've no right here." For a moment, the firelight flashed between them, showing their faces full of anger and fear. Then Carl fired a shot into the air to scare Tom. Tom did not move. Instead, he stepped forward and aimed at the ground near Carl's feet. The sound echoed across the valley. The horses tied behind the rocks neighed loudly. Carl's men began to panic. Rick shouted, Let's go, Carl. The whole town will see the fire. Carl hesitated but then cursed under his breath and ran after them. They jumped on their horses and rode away into the darkness. Tom dropped his rifle and rushed back to the barn. He and Gray worked together to stop the fire. After many long minutes, they managed to control it. The barn was half burned, but the animals were safe. The smell of smoke filled the air and ashes floated in the wind. Tom sat on the ground, breathing hard. His hands were black from soot and sweat ran down his face. Gray stood beside him, shaking his mane. Tom looked at him and smiled weakly. You did well, boy. You saved this place again. The donkey lowered his head, tired but calm. By morning, half the town had heard about the fire. Mr. Hill was one of the first to ride out. When he saw the damage, he looked worried. Are you hurt, Tom? He asked. No, Tom said. But they tried to take what is not theirs. Mr. Hill looked around and said quietly, Was it Carl? Tom nodded. Him and 2 others. They came looking for something they imagined. Mr. Hill shook his head. I'll go to the sheriff. They must be stopped before they do worse. Tom thanked him. Together they went into town later that day. When the sheriff heard the story, he called for Carl and his friends. They denied everything at first, but when the sheriff found ashes on their clothes, they had no excuse left. The sheriff gave them a warning and told them to stay away from Coyote Hollow. But Tom knew men like Carl did not learn easily. They might wait for another chance. That evening, after returning home, Tom stood near the half-burned barn. The land was quiet again. The fire had destroyed part of what he had built, but not his spirit. He looked at Gray and said, We can rebuild it. We've done harder things. He started working right away. For days he gathered new wood, repaired the fences, and rebuilt the barn stronger than before. The town soon noticed his determination. Some began to admire him instead of mocking him. Even the same people who laughed now spoke kindly when they saw him in the store. Mr. Hill often told others, That boy has the heart of his uncle. He turned dead land into life, but Carl was not finished. Anger burned inside him. He sat alone in the saloon, drinking and whispering to anyone who would listen. He thinks he's safe, but I'll make sure that gold ends up in my hands. He watched and waited for another opportunity. Meanwhile, Tom had no idea that danger still hung over him. He focused only on his ranch. The crops grew tall, the animals looked healthy, and the sound of the windmill spinning filled the air. The ranch had become a picture of peace once more. One afternoon, as Tom was fixing a fence, he noticed a shadow on the ridge. It looked like a man on horseback watching from a distance. He narrowed his eyes but said nothing. The figure disappeared a moment later. That night he made sure the rifle was ready and the gold hidden deep. He trusted Gray to wake him if anything went wrong. As he lay down to rest, the stars shone brightly above Coyote Hollow. He remembered his uncle's words in the notebook. The earth gives, but it also hides. Tom now understood their meaning more than ever. The land had given him fortune, but had also forced him to protect it with courage. He closed his eyes, ready for whatever came next. The ranch stood strong again, but fate was not done testing him. Something was about to happen that would decide whether Coyote Hollow would stay his home forever. The days after the fire passed slowly. Tom kept himself busy fixing fences, caring for the animals, and planting new crops. He refused to let fear or anger control him. Gray stayed by his side as always, keeping watch and helping however he could. The donkey had become more than an animal. He was a partner, a friend, and the soul of Coyote Hollow. The townspeople had begun to see Tom in a new light. The same men who once laughed at him now greeted him with respect. The shopkeeper in town gave him fair prices, and even Mrs. White from the bakery sent him bread once a week, saying it was a thank you for showing courage. But not everyone was pleased. Carl sat outside the saloon most days, his pride broken and his heart full of jealousy. His 2 friends had stopped talking to him, afraid of more trouble with the sheriff. Yet Carl could not forget about the rumor of gold. He kept thinking about what his uncle once said long ago about the hills around Coyote Hollow hiding secrets. One evening, when the town lights dimmed and most people went home, Carl made up his mind. He would go back alone and take what he believed was his. The same night, Tom was sitting on his porch reading his uncle's notebook again. He liked the way his uncle had written about the land, about patience, and about trust in simple things. One page had a strange line that Tom had never noticed before. It said, "The key lies where the stone drinks water." He read it again and thought it was a riddle. What could it mean? Gray made a soft sound, drawing his attention. The donkey had been digging near the old well again, pawing at the ground as if searching for something. Tom stood up and walked toward him. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. Gray brayed and kicked a small rock. Beneath it, Tom noticed a patch of ground that looked different from the rest. The soil there was harder, almost like it had been packed long ago. He took a shovel and started digging. After a few minutes, he hit something solid. It was a flat stone. He knelt and brushed the dirt off carefully. The stone had markings, faint but visible, carved into its surface. It looked like an arrow pointing down. Tom felt his heart beat faster. "Where the stone drinks water," he whispered. The old well was only a few feet away. He looked at Gray. "I think we found it." He lifted the stone, and beneath it, there was a small wooden box, covered with years of dirt. Tom pulled it out and opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were several small gold bars, coins, and a few old papers. His eyes widened. It was real. His uncle's hidden fortune was right there beneath the stone. Before he could think further, he heard the sound of hooves in the distance. Someone was approaching the ranch. Tom quickly covered the box again and stood up. Gray brayed loudly, sensing danger. Carl rode into the yard, his face dark and tired. He stopped his horse and glared at Tom. "So it's true," he said. "You found it." Tom took a step back, ready for trouble. "You have no right to be here, Carl. Leave now." Carl shook his head. "You think you can keep everything for yourself? That gold was never yours. It belonged to your uncle, and that makes it part of this town's history. You don't deserve it." Tom's voice was calm but firm. "My uncle left this land to me. Everything here, including what it hides, is mine by law and by work. You had your chance to build something of your own, but you wasted it on envy." Carl jumped down from his horse and reached for his gun. "Then I'll take what's mine." Before he could pull the trigger, Gray charged forward, braying fiercely. The sudden movement startled Carl's horse, which reared up and threw him to the ground. The gun fell and fired a shot into the dirt. Carl tried to grab it again, but Tom kicked it away. "Enough!" Tom shouted. "You're done, Carl. The sheriff warned you once." Carl looked at him, breathing hard, then at the donkey standing protectively in front of Tom. For a moment he seemed to understand that he had lost more than gold. He had lost his pride, his friends, and the respect of everyone in town. He stood up slowly and said, "You'll regret this, Cowboy." But his voice had no strength left. He climbed back onto his horse and rode away into the darkness. Tom watched him go, his heart still pounding. Then he turned to Gray, who stood there calmly as if nothing had happened. "You saved me again, boy," Tom said softly, patting his neck. He dug up the box once more and carried it inside the cabin. He placed it on the table and opened it fully for the first time. The gold shone under the lamplight, but the papers caught his eye more. They were old land deeds, showing that his uncle had secretly bought several plots of land around Coyote Hollow many years ago. It meant Tom now owned more than he had ever imagined. The next morning, Tom rode into town with Gray beside him. He went straight to the sheriff's office and told him everything. The sheriff listened carefully, then nodded. "You did right, Tom. We'll make sure Carl stays away for good this time." Tom also went to Mr. Hill and showed him the papers. The old man smiled and said, "Your uncle always knew you'd do well. He hid this so only a man with patience and honesty could find it. And that's you, Tom." Word spread quickly through the town. People gathered around to hear how the same cowboy they once mocked had found his uncle's hidden fortune and defended his ranch with courage. Many came to shake his hand. Some apologized for how they had treated him before. In the following weeks, Tom used part of the gold to rebuild Coyote Hollow into a strong and beautiful ranch. He hired workers from the town, gave fair pay, and helped the local store reopen after a bad season. He even donated money to fix the old church roof. People began calling him the cowboy with the golden heart. It made him smile, but he always said the same thing. "It wasn't me. It was the land and the donkey that helped me." Gray became famous too. Children from town came to see the brave donkey who had saved his owner more than once and helped find the gold. Tom always welcomed them and told them stories about his uncle, the land, and the lesson of patience. Months later, when the season changed and the fields turned green again, Tom stood on his porch looking over his land. The barn was strong, the fences were new, and the sound of the windmill turning filled the air. Coyote Hollow had become more than a ranch. It was a symbol of hard work, faith, and second chances. Mr. Hill visited often, bringing stories from town. One day he said, "Tom, people don't laugh about you anymore. They tell their children how you turned a dry land into gold." Tom smiled and looked at Gray, who was grazing near the well. "It wasn't luck," he said. "It was trust. My uncle trusted the land and I trusted the same." When night came, Tom sat again with the old notebook on his lap. He added a new line at the end, writing in careful letters, "The land hides treasure not of gold but of faith and courage. And sometimes a donkey helps you find both." He closed the book, looked at the stars, and felt peace in his heart. The town that once mocked him now respected him. The land that once looked dead now bloomed with life. Coyote Hollow had become a story of hope, told around fires and in homes across the valley. And every time someone passed the ranch, they saw the man and his donkey, and remembered that even the smallest beginnings could lead to the brightest endings.